After being 30 years in the making, and lots of controversy over the past year about it, Megalopolis is here. Well, it'll be here in a few days, but I got to see it yesterday. And well, man, at the risk of sounding a little cliche, it is complicated. Welcome everyone to Kino. My name is Kino. Thank you for applauding my jacket. You see, I got this jacket from one Will Neff. He tossed it in the crowd. I caught it. It's not a big deal. I can see it'll probably be distracting, so I'll take it off a little later. But anyways, we're here to talk about Megalopolis because I was very fortunate enough to go to the Ultimate IMAX experience yesterday. That was across, I think, around 65 theaters in the U.S. Actually, I don't know if it's just the U.S. It doesn't matter. Anyway. And I got to see the movie, and I got to see the movie in a very cool, unique way that included a Q&A beforehand with the creator of the film, the director, Francis Ford Coppola, Robert De Niro, and Spike Lee. And I got to experience the immersive element in the film, which if you know anything about the film, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, which was awesome. It was really fun, and honestly, I don't care that it's a gimmick. It was just fun. It's unique and it's different, and I think that is ultimately going to be the core message of the movie. But I don't want to spoil what it is for those who haven't seen all of kind of the press around what that is. I don't want to spoil anything about this film. I just want to talk about the film itself, how I believe it's going to be received, how I feel about the film, and ultimately if it was worth making it. Before we get into the goods and the bads and everything like that, I want to give you a synopsis for what the film is about, and then we'll go into it. Now, I don't have the synopsis pulled up or anything, or the plot summary or whatever. I'm just going to tell you what I got from it. So, ultimately, the story kind of follows a political journey to a certain degree in a political battle in a city called New Rome. Now, New Rome is essentially modern day America, but with the aesthetics of old Rome. Now, the thing about that is it mostly kind of affects the fashion of the era more than anything. The fashion is very much so awesome. For one, I love the fashion, to be honest with you. There's so many cool designs, but essentially instead of wearing a suit, you wear a suit with like a cape kind of thing, or draped with tunics and such like that. It's nothing really too crazy, and to be quite honest, I don't really know if setting it with modern day Rome ever really affected kind of the world so much. More so, it just was kind of the aesthetic of the movie. I don't really think it really comes into play that much overall. Of course, there's a reason why he wanted to do it. It's to kind of set the example that the way the Roman Empire fell is the same way that our society in America will fall today if we don't do something about it now. And that's kind of the big thing about the movie is much more about kind of messaging than it is about plot. And that is going to be incredibly divisive, that is for sure. But either way, that's the basic summary, is that it's about a political battle between two kind of opponents, and there's some little opponents that come in, just kind of the overall world of New Rome, and going into all of the kind of seediness, and going into the ambitiousness, and going into the idea of the rich and the elite doing whatever they want to do while the poor kind of suffer. And I don't know what to tell you. That's just kind of the synopsis of the film. There's not really a plot. Like, maybe I'm crazy here, maybe I'm totally incorrect, but in all honesty, there's not much of a plot. It just kind of, you get to just watch the experience happen. Nothing really changes all that much. You just kind of experience the journey, and that's pretty much it. Okay, I feel like I've said too much. I think it's time now that we get into the good, the bad, the take. So the good. Now, this film has an immense amount of good. A lot of things that I really love about it. And so, let's talk about it. So for one, I already kind of hinted at kind of one of the smaller things, which is the fashion. I think the overall style and the decadence that is included in the film is beautiful. It's an amazing looking film with so much going on that it's always fun to look at. Like, I mean, the design is just beautiful. If Francis was a painter, well, he made a masterpiece in that regard. Ultimately, it's an amazing looking film from beginning to end, with lots of different interesting concepts and throwing together this style of course, ancient Rome and bringing it into a modern day. It's very beautiful and very lovely, and I couldn't get enough. Now, moving past just the aesthetics, it's also got some good substance. I mean, it's very interesting because it's an incredibly flashy film and it has substance in its messaging, but the plot for some reason just isn't really that important. And I'm sure that Francis has a reason for that. But either way, the story, the overall kind of thing that you follow throughout the film, because like I said, while there's not much of a plot, you do follow a story to a certain degree. It's just that for all of kind of the big things that change and the big things that matter, you don't really see it yourself. That kind of happens between time jumps. Like, film jumps forward in time a good little bit, and like all the kind of important stuff happens off the screen. You're just there to kind of capture the day in the life of that character going through that thing. And so, I mean, ultimately, that whole universe and that whole epic fable that you follow, it's a really good one. I really enjoyed every bit of it. I think that ultimately I would have liked to see more of the actual story. I would have liked a more coherent attaching together of things to really tell the whole thing. But I mean, I got it and I enjoyed it, so well, who am I to complain? I'm just more worried, I think, about kind of casual audiences. I don't really know, honestly, how this is going to play at all. But I do know that I really loved the overall story. Now let's get into the cast. I mean, the cast is phenomenal all the way around. There is, of course, Shia LaBeouf in it, and I mean, he's a good actor when he can put it on, and luckily in this movie he puts it on. But I think it's mostly helped by the fact that he is in a role that everyone can love to hate pretty easily. And I think having him in that role is one of those unique kind of things where it's like, oh wow, I don't really like this person, and they're in a role of a person that you're not meant to like, and so it's like, all right, well, damn, I gotta hand it to him. It works. It works really well. He knows what he was doing. I think he knew what he was doing when he did that. And then, of course, we have Adam Driver in our main role. He plays this architect, creative guy, to some degree, and he is amazing. I think by far he is the best actor in the whole film. He is impeccable in his deliveries. Some of the funniest things I've heard him come directly out of his mouth. I don't think I'm gonna forget one of my favorite line deliveries about going to the club. It's fantastic. I mean, the way he plays the character is incredible because he goes from this prophesizing kind of madman, creative genius to this goofy, in public kind of freelance. Freelance is not the right word. Carefree, just ridiculous person like in the next 2 minutes, and it's always so fun to see that switch, and it never feels unwarranted, it never feels goofy. He manages to deliver it so incredibly well. He was amazing. I loved Adam Driver in this film through and through. Then you have, of course, Giancarlo Esposito, and Giancarlo Esposito is amazing as well. I mean, Giancarlo is always kind of poised to play villains in movies, and in this film it's not super different. He is also another kind of villain to a certain degree, depending on who you are, I guess. But he is playing it a little bit different. I think that a lot of times he has kind of the stoicness. This time he very much so gets to lean a lot more into his emotions, which I like a lot. I love his stoic characters. I think they're so great and so fun. But I've seen him do it so much now, and no hate to him. I think he should get his money. But I want to see him do more different things. I really, really do, because he's a phenomenal actor. He just never really gets the chance to kind of spread his wings. And so he does really, really good in this film. Very much so plays. Oh man, when I think about some of the quotes from the film and some of the things that he says and the way he says them, they're incredible. Like, he plays the mayor of the town essentially, and this mayor very much so has a tendency to get aggressive and let his emotions fly, which is not something that his characters really get to do. And it's always interesting. It's fun to hear the way he would say the dialogue and hear the way that he responds to things, because it goes from very merrily sometimes to very much so just kind of like, I do not care, I'm going to let it out now kind of thing. And I love that. Aubrey Plaza also is in the film, and she is really, really good in her role. It's very interesting. She's a strange character and strange way that it's played, but it works so well in Megalopolis that is full of strange characters, where essentially she has the very much so the Aubrey Plaza kind of I'm forgetting that word, but very much so you know how Aubrey Plaza talks, if you've seen her in Parks and Recreation or anything, where she talks like, and then there will be blood and more blood, and then there's like this stuff, and she does that throughout the film because she's a TV reporter, and I think that kind of goes and attests to the fact that I think Frances picks generally the perfect person for the character, rather than the perfect person who can play that character, if that makes sense. Like, I think that Shia LaBeouf, just as himself, fits into his role very well. And I think Aubrey Plaza, as herself, fits into her role very well, to a certain degree. Obviously, I don't think they're the same as their characters, don't get me wrong, but I think that just kind of their way of being and their outward way of speaking more than anything, very much so has helped in that role. Um, but she does great throughout the film, really, really fun. Natalie Emmanuel, I believe is her name, also in the film, also really good. She is very much so kind of just a very, I don't even know how to explain it. She's just a good character overall. I think that ultimately she kind of gets pushed a little to the side to a certain degree. Like, she's always there for the most part, but at the same time, she never really does too much other than just kind of be there for others, which is very interesting because I think that in the beginning of the film, they're kind of setting her up to be and seem like she's going to be and do a lot more, but she just ends up kind of being the main kind of person who's around and connects kind of all the threads, which she's still great in it. I think that honestly, she did really, really well, and there's really, really an amazing cast all the way around. I don't think anyone ever pulled any punches. I think they all did fantastic. All right, going off of the cast list, I want to talk about a few people whose names completely slipped my mind. But we have Grace Vanderwall, who plays Vesta Sweetwater, and that was a fun and interesting character for sure. Very small, very minor, but very much so. It's an interesting kind of story that gets told, and a very interesting subplot, which honestly has a little bit of weird messaging, but also very much so kind of links into things you'll see today when it comes to pop stars who are child stars, and then they have a whole thing. And it's very, very much so on the nose in that regard, but you'll see that when you get there. Dustin Hoffman was great. He's not there for too long, but he's fun. He has a good time. When you see him, he does great. I mean, it's Dustin Hoffman, you know. Then Jon Voight as well. I mean, Jon Voight, he is great. Like, he does so good throughout the film as that role. I don't really. He essentially is kind of a rich tycoon who's related to our main architect, Adam Driver, and he's fun. He just plays an old kooky guy, but he's not actually that. He feigns it for the most part, and he has a really fantastic scene towards the end that comes out of nowhere, and he does it great. I just have to hand it to him. Jason Schwartzman, he's hardly there in the film, honestly, but I mean, he does fine. He does his job, and you gotta love that. Same thing with Lawrence Fishburne as well. Lawrence Fishburne, again, another character that I feel like there's probably more to kind of be said with that character and more for them to do, but it never really kind of came to be. He's the narrator throughout the film, and he does a great job of doing it. And I mean, I loved it. What can I say? He is great all the way around. Cast is great. The story is great. The aesthetic is great. It's time for the bad. Okay, so the bad. Now, like I said, the film is complicated. I think that there's a lot of amazing things from it. A lot of things I'm going to think about for a long time. A lot of it that I really, really love. However, I don't love the plot and the story that gets told. Mostly just the way it's told. Is that it's very much so, like I said before, it jumps through time in a way that is a little frustrating sometimes, where you don't really see a lot of the important stuff happen in between. You just kind of get to your destination, and then you see what's going on there, and the window closes. You come to another destination, you see what's going on there, and the window closes. Throughout the film, I really can't think of any progress that gets made other than just the kind of megalopolis city being built. And that's pretty much it. But you don't see that happen. That always happens off screen. In terms of like characters, relationships, like things new things develop and everything. But at the end, all of it's very inconsequential. A lot of the relationships that are built, a lot of the kind of stories and arguments that are had, in the end, they never really mattered. And maybe that's part of this messaging of the film. I'm not too sure. But ultimately, the story itself is a very entertaining one. It's a very beautiful one. There's a lot of great things going on, but it's very much so, I would honestly call it a little incoherent. I think that it's very hard. It's gonna be very hard for people to grasp kind of the overall world, because it brings up concepts like a special kind of material that you can build out of that is brand new. It brings up a new city that's being built. It brings up I don't want to spoil anything, but there's this really weird concept that I still haven't really grasped. It has to do with time. It's very much so kind of superpower esque and supernatural esque to a certain degree, and or scientifically, I don't know, a miracle esque kind of thing. And I don't really know if that's real or not. Throughout the whole film, if I'm being completely honest, it's strange because there's manipulation of time in the film, and it's kind of hard to tell if it's a real thing or a fake thing or what's going on there. I'm not really sure how that works, but either way, that's kind of my biggest negative about the film is there's a lot of incoherence when it comes to the actual storytelling. They very much so focus on messaging, very much so focus on just being in these moments rather than it's about necessarily telling a full, complete story. Because there is a story there, but like I said, you're kind of hopping along as it goes rather than actually experiencing it from start to finish, I would say. Um, and I think that's probably my biggest negative takeaway from the film. Honestly, other than that, I don't think I really have too much to say. I think the pacing is good. I think the acting is good. I don't think there's anything really that bugs me about the film otherwise. I really, really don't. And that's kind of a shock to me, is that I thought I'd have more negative things to say about it, because I think that there are things that I really wasn't the biggest fan of. But when it comes down to it, I think it mostly just comes to the fact that it's very much so told in a way that isn't meant to follow along. It's mostly more so meant to experience rather than understand and see every little thing happen. But ultimately, we're in the bad section. But I mean, what am I gonna do? I have great things to say. Ultimately, it has amazing, beautiful scenes. It has a great story to tell. It has a lot of fun going throughout, and it's bold. It's unique. It's taking an advancement. It's taking a step in a direction that it wants to, especially with this whole immersive element thing. I think that's so interesting. I think that, you can play it off as a gimmick and that's fine. But I think that, again, very much so, this movie in and of itself is asking the question, do we have to accept the way things are, or can we try to do things differently? Why not progress rather than recess? And so, yeah, overall, great scenes, great story. We're trying to keep this spoiler free, so I really don't have anything else bad to say about it. I would just say that, I guess I'll put this in the bad section. I don't know how this film is going to be received by a general. I really don't. It's confusing and convoluted, and that's as someone who loves film. It's as someone who loves to experience and enjoy films and figure out films. For a general audience, I really have no idea what to expect. And I think that if you would ask me like 8 months ago in my youth, when they said like, oh, they don't know how to market the film, I'd be like, it's Francis Ford Coppola, you're crazy. And now, after maturing a good 8 months or so, I think that I've realized that I'm just a nerd. Like, I'm just an actual nerd who loves film, and not everyone is that. And so for me, it may seem like a no-brainer. Everyone's gonna love it, but at the same time, watching the film now, I don't know I don't know what audience it's gonna grasp. I think that you're gonna have people who are very much so, um, kind of I don't even know how to explain it. You have people who are kind of looking for something unique, a world that they want to explore, and I think that will be an audience. I think that you'll get people, of course, who agree with the political message, and that'll be an audience. But as for general kind of moviegoers, I don't really know how they're gonna feel about this film, because it's flashy in its beauty. It's not really flashy in like an action sort of way. So I feel like it's going to struggle to really find and capture an audience. And I think that is a tough thing. I don't think that films need to always be successful. I don't think they need to capture an audience. I really don't. However, I do believe that is kind of a tightrope that you choose to walk or you don't choose to walk. And I think they chose simply just not to walk it. I think he made his film that he wanted to make, and I'm happy that he did it. But I can see how that's going to be a bit of an issue when it comes to the fact that he poured so much money into it of his own. And I would like to hope and I'd like to think that he'll get it back, but I honestly don't know. It's going to be an interesting thing to see when it comes out in a few days about how audiences receive it. With all that said, let's get to. For me, I really do think that there's going to be a lot to say about the film, and I think that Not everyone is going to grasp it, and I think that that is totally okay and normal. I slept on this one tonight because normally I make my films, or my films, Jesus. Normally I make my videos right after seeing films and kind of giving my fresh thoughts, but this one I was like, I want to kind of sleep on it and really take it in. And ultimately, it wasn't until I would say kind of the last 15 minutes or so that I really am kind of grasping what the film's overall message is trying to be. And maybe I'll give you that. I think I'll tell you what I think about it. And if you don't want to hear, if you just want to kind of go in blind and see if you can kind of grasp it, then that's great. Because this is just my take overall. I could be completely missing it. All in all, everything you see in the film, it's trying to parallel a lot of kind of real world stuff. And I mean, in the Q&A beforehand, I'll just say that they're very much so not shy about sharing their political leanings. But Francis is very much so saying that he wants a great debate to happen, and he wants everyone in the world, regardless of what political aisle you lean in, to come in and discuss this together and discuss the future of the world, the future of America, right? And Robert De Niro said one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my life. Robert De Niro comes out and he's very much so very opposed to right wing anything, and very much so comes out and says how he's worried about the future because of Donald Trump, and he's saying how important it is to vote, which of course it is. And it was so funny the way that he did it. I swear on my life, I really hope it's recorded somewhere, that whole interview, because it's so funny, it's so great. Spike Lee jumps in about the whole idea of, hey, did the ancient Romans eat cats and dogs? And man, God, like I said, it's gonna be divisive as hell. I'm sure there are people in this video who are watching who are divisive as hell, but I don't know what to tell you, man. They're fantastic, they're great, I love it, and I agree wholeheartedly with a lot of the messaging. But I want to talk about the film's messaging in a second. But I need to say what Robert De Niro said because it was so damn funny. Robert De Niro, I think, word for word, bar for bar, says this. He says, Donald Trump could not direct this film. Just imagine Donald Trump directing this film. He couldn't do it. And I think that's just one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my entire life. It's like, okay, Robert, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And you know what? I agree. But what does that have to do with anything? It's just so funny to me. I mean, as someone who is obviously with a creative mind, I think that they view things and he views things a little differently. But you know what? It was effective. I loved it. I'll never forget that. And you know what? He's absolutely right. I don't think Donald Trump could direct this film. Not one bit. Not at all. But anyways, God, the Q&A was so much fun. If you can find it on YouTube or something, it was hilarious from start to finish. I loved it. Really great stories and anecdotes. Great. Anyways, the overall messaging of Megalopolis, what I took away from it, and it's very much so helped by the Q&A and helped by Francis's kind of viewpoint. I believe that the film is trying to say that there's no reason not to search for a better world. There's no reason not to see if we can try to do things better. That I think that we as citizens and as middle class, lower class people and human beings, we're just kind of told to accept things the way they are a lot of the time. That the world that we have right now is as good as it can get. That utopia is kind of a dirty word, and that couldn't exist. There's no way of making that happen. And ultimately, I think that there are certain aspects of that I agree to. Do I really believe that there can be an amazing, beautiful society where there's no harm, no foul, no bad, no horrible? I don't believe that I do. But maybe I'm a cynic. And maybe I'm brainwashed into believing that, you know? And that's kind of the point of the film, I believe. Is it's about questioning, asking the question. It's about pushing forward. That not accepting things as they are, but to dream of what could be. And there's no reason not to do that. The only people who benefit from you not doing that and not trying that are the people who just have it good right now. That they don't care to try and make things better because their lives are fine. But they don't care about the people on the street. They don't care about the people who can't afford groceries. They don't care about the people who have hard lives because their lives are great. And ultimately, there are people with platforms, and there are people who get to tell everyone, hey, this is as good as it gets. Make what you will of it. And at the end of the day, I don't think it's such a bad thing and a bad message. I think it's actually a really great message to say, well, why do we have to listen to them? Why can't we simply try to move forward? Why can't we simply try to make things better and just see what happens. And that's what happens in the film. Is that's kind of the overarching plot, is that one man is trying to make things better and the rest are saying why it's impossible and complaining along the way. And I'll kind of end my tangent there about the kind of messaging of the film, but I would like to say there's a very interesting parallel, I think, to Francis Ford Coppola's career, where very much so, whenever he would get in charge of something, whenever he would make something, oftentimes he would have producers and members of the production team and the studios would always have something to complain about and always say, like, you can't do this, it's impossible, you can't do that, it's impossible. I mean, he told the story about The Godfather, making The Godfather Part 2, is that when he said he wanted to make The Godfather, he wanted to call it The Godfather Part 2, which is one of the very first films to ever have a sequel have a number in the title, as opposed to Ivan the Terrible before that, which he already talked about, but he didn't. He told them, he knew they didn't know that, and so he was fine. But essentially, when he did that, everyone's like, oh, but the thing about that is, like, people are going to think that that's just going to be the second half of the first part of the movie they've already watched. And so they pushed back on it, and he pushed back right back, and ultimately, it was fine. I don't necessarily think that naming that helped the film in any way. I think there's just kind of an aesthetic choice that makes it nice. But the point is that a lot of people so focused on making sure that nothing gets messed up right now are too scared to just do something different and try to make things better, try to do things in a new way and see what could happen, as opposed to just sit there and say, no, it's impossible, it won't work for this and that. Why not push forward and see what we can make happen? Now, the final take of the film, I've pretty much kind of given it. I told you how I felt about the overall messaging and the story and what I believe it to be. And so I guess I'm just going to kind of wrap things up here with giving it a rating and explain that I think the film is really, really great if you want it to be great, and it's really, really bad if you want it to be bad. It is literally a film that will beat whatever you make of it, that if you go in trying to enjoy and experience the whole experience, then you will. If you go in trying to just be mad at it because of the political messaging, then you will. If you go into trying to be just this overcritical, ridiculous person who doesn't enjoy film, they just like complaining about film, well then, that's what you'll get out of it. Either way, for me, as someone who loves film, I had a good time. I had a great time. And that's all I ever care about with film. Is as long as I have a great time, as long as I have a good time, then the minutia of it, who cares, right? So, ultimately, Megalopolis, which, just the title alone is a genius title. I love it. Goofy, silly, elegant, regal. It's just a good title. I think overall, like, Megalopolis is probably the most perfect title I could think of for this film. Megalopolis gets between 1,000 or 0 to 1,000. Wow, that surprised me actually. I didn't think it would be that high, but it just kind of came to me, man. It really did. I'm gonna give it a solid 900, a solid 900. I really do think ultimately it was an amazing experience. Beautiful, great story, great acting. I really just don't have anything to complain about. If that comes on TV, I can see myself just sitting there and enjoying it, And I think that he ambitiously strove to make something excellent, and I think that is nothing but admirable. And so hats off. And there we go. That is Megalopolis. I am very excited for everyone to see it, and I'm very excited to see everyone's thoughts. I really am curious about who's going to like it, who's not going to like it, what the word about it's going to be. And ultimately, like I said, I think the messaging is something to think about. If you agree with my take or not, I still think that it'll make you think regardless. Hopefully. We'll see. It's complicated. By the way, this has been Kino. My name is Kino, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. I'll see you later.